Experience the Word of God anytime, anywhere for free. Tune in to our audio Bible at jehovahsaint.com. It's a gift for your soul, available now. The Life of Daniel Audiobook. Author, Michael A. Hopkins. Introduction. Welcome to The Life of Daniel, an exploration of one of the most intriguing figures in the Bible. Daniel, a noble Jew exiled in Babylon, is renowned for his unwavering faith, remarkable wisdom, and prophetic visions. His story unfolds in the book of Daniel, a text that not only recounts his experiences but also offers profound insights into God's sovereignty and the nature of faith in challenging circumstances. The book of Daniel is set against the backdrop of the Babylonian exile, a pivotal period in Jewish history. It begins with the siege of Jerusalem by King Nebuchadnezzar, who took Daniel and other young men captive to serve in his court. This narrative is rich with themes of loyalty, courage, and divine intervention, making it a timeless source of inspiration for believers. Scriptural foundation. The book of Daniel opens with a powerful introduction in Daniel 1, verses 1-2, NIV. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim king of Judah into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. This passage sets the stage for Daniel's journey, highlighting the sovereignty of God even in the midst of exile. Throughout the book, we witness Daniel's steadfast faith as he navigates the complexities of life in a foreign land, interprets dreams, and receives visions of future events. Themes of the book. The life of Daniel is characterized by several key themes. Faithfulness in adversity. Daniel's commitment to God is unwavering, even when faced with the pressures of a pagan society. His refusal to compromise his beliefs serves as a powerful example for believers today. Divine sovereignty. The narrative emphasizes God's control over history and nations. Daniel's interpretations of dreams reveal God's plans for the future, assuring readers that he is always at work. Hope and restoration. Despite the challenges of exile, the book conveys a message of hope. Daniel's visions point to a future restoration for Israel and the ultimate triumph of God's kingdom. As we delve into the life of Daniel, we will explore his remarkable experiences, the lessons learned, and the enduring impact of his faith. Join us on this journey through the pages of Scripture, where we will uncover the profound truths found in the life of this extraordinary prophet. Chapter 1. Daniel's training in Babylon. The story of Daniel begins in a time of great upheaval for the people of Judah. In the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim's reign, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, besieged Jerusalem. This event marked the beginning of a significant chapter in Israel's history, as many of its finest young men were taken captive to serve in the Babylonian court. The Siege of Jerusalem. The book of Daniel opens with a powerful declaration in Daniel 1 verses 1-2, NIV. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim king of Judah into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. This passage highlights God's sovereignty, as it was the Lord who allowed Jehoiakim to be defeated. The Babylonian conquest was not merely a political event. It was part of God's divine plan for his people. The selection of young men. Among those taken captive was Daniel, along with his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. These young men were of noble lineage and were chosen for their potential to serve in the king's palace. The Babylonian officials aimed to indoctrinate them into the culture and practices of Babylon, which included learning the language and literature of the Chaldeans, Daniel 1 verse 4. Training and temptation. The captives were to be trained for 3 years, during which they would be provided with the king's food and wine. However, Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal provisions. He understood that consuming food from the king's table would compromise his Jewish dietary laws and his commitment to God. In Daniel 1 verse 8, NIV, it states, "But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way." Daniel's decision to abstain from the king's food was a courageous act of faith. He recognized that his relationship with God was paramount, and he was willing to take a stand, even in a foreign land. The test of faith. Daniel approached the chief official and requested a test. He asked to be given only vegetables to eat and water to drink for 10 days. This request was met with hesitation, as the official feared for his own life if Daniel and his friends appeared weaker than the other young men who consumed the royal food. However, Daniel's faith and determination led to a compromise. The official agreed to the test, and at the end of the 10 days, Daniel and his friends appeared healthier and better nourished than those who ate the king's food. Daniel 1 verse 15. God's favor and wisdom. As a result of their faithfulness, God granted Daniel and his friends knowledge and understanding. In Daniel 1 verse 17, NIV, it says, "To these 4 young men God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds." Their commitment to God not only preserved their integrity, but also positioned them for success in the Babylonian court. When they were presented before King Nebuchadnezzar, he found them to be 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his kingdom. Daniel 1 verse 20. Conclusion of the chapter. Chapter 1 of Daniel sets the stage for the remarkable journey of faith that Daniel and his friends would undertake in Babylon. Their unwavering commitment to God in the face of adversity serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of faithfulness and integrity. As we continue to explore Daniel's life, we will witness how his faith and wisdom would lead to extraordinary encounters with kings, the interpretation of dreams, and the unfolding of God's plans for his people. Chapter 2. The Dream of Nebuchadnezzar. In this chapter, we delve into one of the most pivotal events in the book of Daniel, the interpretation of King Nebuchadnezzar's troubling dream. This event not only showcases Daniel's extraordinary ability to interpret dreams, but also highlights God's sovereignty over world events and the future of kingdoms. The king's disturbing dream. In the 2nd year of his reign, King Nebuchadnezzar had a series of dreams that troubled him deeply, leaving him unable to sleep. Disturbed by the dream, he called upon the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and Chaldeans to interpret the dream for him. However, he demanded that they first tell him what he had dreamed, as recounted in Daniel 2, verses 1 to 3, NIV. In the 2nd year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, "I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means." The king's demand was unprecedented, and the wise men were terrified. They explained that no one could fulfill such a request, as it was beyond human capability to know someone else's dream. In a fit of rage, Nebuchadnezzar decreed that all the wise men in Babylon should be executed for their inability to reveal and interpret his dream. Daniel 2 verse 5. Daniel's response. When Daniel learned about the king's decree, he sought permission to speak with the king. He asked for time to interpret the dream, demonstrating both his faith in God and his courage. Daniel then returned to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and urged them to pray for mercy from God so that they might understand the mystery of the dream. Daniel 2 verses 17 to 18. That night, God revealed the dream and its interpretation to Daniel in a vision. Filled with gratitude, Daniel praised God for his wisdom and power. In Daniel 2 verses 20 to 23, NIV, he proclaimed, "Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king." The dream revealed. Daniel approached the king and, with God's guidance, revealed the dream to Nebuchadnezzar. He described a great statue made of various materials: the head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, the belly and thighs of bronze, the legs of iron, and the feet partly of iron and partly of clay. This statue represented successive kingdoms, with each material symbolizing a different empire. Daniel 2 verses 31 to 33. In Daniel 2 verses 36 to 38, NIV, Daniel explained, "This was the dream. and now we will interpret it to the king. Your Majesty, you are the King of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold. The interpretation of the kingdoms. Daniel continued to interpret the dream, revealing that after Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, another kingdom would arise, inferior to his own, the silver, followed by a third kingdom of bronze that would rule over the whole earth, the bronze. Finally, a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, would crush and break all the others, the iron. Daniel 2 verses 39 to 40. The feet of the statue, made of a mixture of iron and clay, represented a divided kingdom that would be partly strong and partly weak. Daniel 2 verses 41 to 43. However, the final part of the dream provided a message of hope. A stone that was cut out, not by human hands, would strike the statue and bring it crashing down, ultimately becoming a great mountain that filled the whole earth. Daniel 2 verses 44 to 45. This stone symbolized the everlasting kingdom of God that would ultimately triumph over all earthly kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar's response. Amazed by Daniel's wisdom and the accuracy of the interpretation, Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and acknowledged the greatness of his God. He offered gifts and honored Daniel, declaring him to be the ruler over the province of Babylon and chief of the wise men. Daniel 2 verses 46 to 48. In Daniel 2 verse 47, NIV, the king proclaimed, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery." Conclusion of the chapter. Chapter 2 of Daniel illustrates the power of faith and the sovereignty of God in revealing truth and guiding the course of history. Daniel's unwavering commitment to God, combined with his wisdom and courage, not only saved the lives of the wise men but also positioned him as a key figure in the Babylonian court. As we continue to explore Daniel's life, we will witness how his faith and integrity would further impact the unfolding story of God's people and their relationship with the empires of the world. Chapter 3. The Fiery Furnace. In this chapter, we witness one of the most dramatic events in the book of Daniel, the refusal of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to bow down to King Nebuchadnezzar's golden statue. Their unwavering faith in God amidst persecution exemplifies the strength of conviction and the power of divine deliverance. The golden statue. King Nebuchadnezzar, in response to his dream's interpretation and the acknowledgement of Daniel's God, constructed a massive golden statue that stood 90 feet high and 9 feet wide on the plain of Dura. Daniel 3 verse 1. He summoned all the officials of Babylon, including governors, advisors, and magistrates, to gather for the dedication of the statue. At the dedication ceremony, a herald proclaimed that at the sound of musical instruments, everyone was to fall down and worship the golden statue. The decree was clear. Anyone who failed to bow would be thrown into a blazing furnace. Daniel 3 verses 4 to 6. The defiance of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Among those present were 3 Hebrew men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Despite the king's edict, these faithful servants of God refused to bow down to the statue. Their actions did not go unnoticed. Certain Chaldeans reported their defiance to Nebuchadnezzar, accusing them of disregarding the king's command. Daniel 3 verse 12. In Daniel 3 verses 13 to 15, NIV, the king summoned the 3 men and questioned them directly. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" The courageous response. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood firm in their faith, responding to the king with remarkable courage. They declared their refusal to worship the statue, stating that their God was able to deliver them from the furnace, but even if he did not, they would not serve the king's gods or worship the golden image. Daniel 3 verses 16 to 18. In Daniel 3 verses 17 to 18 NIV, they proclaimed, "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Their declaration demonstrated not only their faith in God's power, but also their unwavering commitment to him, regardless of the consequences. The fiery furnace. Enraged by their defiance, Nebuchadnezzar ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. He commanded some of his strongest soldiers to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the furnace. The flames were so intense that the soldiers who threw them in were consumed by the heat. Daniel 3 verses 19 to 22. Divine deliverance. As the king watched, he was astonished to see 4 men walking unharmed in the fire, unbound and unscathed. The fourth figure appeared to be like a divine being, and Nebuchadnezzar exclaimed in amazement, asking his advisors about the situation. Daniel 3 verses 24 to 25. In Daniel 3 verses 26 to 27 NIV, the king approached the entrance of the furnace and called out, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisers crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. The miraculous preservation of the 3 men was a powerful testament to God's ability to deliver his faithful servants. The king's declaration. In light of this incredible event, Nebuchadnezzar praised the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He acknowledged that no other God could save in such a manner and issued a decree that anyone who spoke against their God would be punished. Daniel 3 verses 28 to 29. In Daniel 3 verse 28 NIV, he proclaimed, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God." Conclusion of the chapter. Chapter 3 of Daniel highlights the theme of unwavering faith in the face of persecution and the miraculous deliverance of God's faithful servants. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's refusal to compromise their beliefs serves as a powerful example for believers today. Their story encourages us to stand firm in our convictions, trusting in God's power to deliver us, regardless of the circumstances we may face. As we continue to explore the life of Daniel and his friends, we will see how their faith and courage shaped their destiny and impacted the world around them. Chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar's Dream of a Great Tree. Chapter 4 of the book of Daniel presents a personal account from King Nebuchadnezzar, recounting a troubling dream that ultimately leads him to acknowledge the sovereignty of God. This chapter serves as a powerful reminder of the consequences of pride and the mercy of God in calling individuals to repentance. The king's proclamation. The chapter opens with Nebuchadnezzar addressing all peoples, nations, and languages, proclaiming the signs and wonders that the Most High God had performed for him. Daniel 4 verses 1 to 3. In his proclamation, he expresses his awe at God's greatness and emphasizes the importance of recognizing his power. "It is my pleasure to tell you about the miraculous signs and wonders that the Most High God has performed for me. How great are his signs! How mighty his wonders! His kingdom is an eternal kingdom. His dominion endures from generation to generation." Daniel 4 verses 2 to 3 NIV. The troubling dream. Despite his proclamation of God's greatness, Nebuchadnezzar soon experienced another distressing dream that left him troubled. In the dream, he saw a great tree in the middle of the earth, reaching to the heavens and providing shelter and food for all creatures. However, a holy messenger came down from heaven, declaring that the tree was to be cut down, leaving only the stump and roots. Daniel 4 verses 10 to 14. In Daniel 4 verse 14 NIV, the decree was clear. "Cut down the tree and trim off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it and the birds from its branches." The call for interpretation. Disturbed by the dream, Nebuchadnezzar summoned all the wise men of Babylon to interpret it, but none of them could provide an answer. Daniel 4 verse 15. Finally, he called for Daniel, who had previously interpreted dreams and earned a reputation for his wisdom and ability to understand mysteries. When Daniel arrived, Nebuchadnezzar explained the dream and asked for its interpretation. Daniel 4 verse 18. Daniel's interpretation. Upon hearing the dream, Daniel was initially alarmed, as he understood its implications for the king. He expressed concern for Nebuchadnezzar, recognizing that the dream signified a significant judgment from God. Daniel 4 verse 19. In Daniel 4 verses 20 to 22, NIV, Daniel interpreted the dream. The tree you saw, which grew large and strong, with its top touching the sky, visible to the whole earth, with beautiful leaves and abundant fruit, providing food for all, giving shelter to the wild animals, and having nesting places in its branches for the birds. Your Majesty, you are that tree. You have become great and strong. Your greatness has grown until it reaches the sky, and your dominion extends to distant parts of the earth. The judgment pronounced. Daniel explained that the decree from the holy messenger was a warning to the king. He would be driven away from people and live like a wild animal, eating grass like cattle, until he recognized that the Most High God rules over all kingdoms of men. Daniel 4 verses 23 to 25. In Daniel 4 verse 26, NIV, Daniel added, "The command to leave the stump of the tree with its roots means that your kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules." Daniel urged Nebuchadnezzar to renounce his sins by doing what is right and his wickedness by being kind to the oppressed, hoping that this would lead to a prolongation of his prosperity. Daniel 4 verse 27. The fulfillment of the dream. Despite Daniel's warning, Nebuchadnezzar did not heed the counsel. 12 months later, while he was walking on the roof of the royal palace in Babylon, he boasted about the greatness of his kingdom, attributing his achievements to his own power and glory. Daniel 4 verses 28 to 30. In that moment, the fulfillment of the dream came to pass. A voice from heaven declared that his royal authority had been taken from him, and he would be driven away from people to live as a wild animal. Daniel 4 verses 31 to 33. Restoration and praise. After a period of time living in madness, Nebuchadnezzar's sanity was restored. He lifted his eyes toward heaven and acknowledged God's sovereignty. In that moment, his understanding returned, and he praised and honored the Most High. Daniel 4 verses 34 to 36. In Daniel 4 verses 34 to 35, NIV, he proclaimed, "At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation." Nebuchadnezzar recognized that all the inhabitants of the earth are regarded as nothing compared to God, who does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. Daniel 4 verse 35. Conclusion of the chapter. Chapter 4 of Daniel serves as a powerful testimony to the consequences of pride and the importance of humility before God. Nebuchadnezzar's journey from prideful ruler to a humble servant of the Most High illustrates the transformative power of repentance and recognition of God's sovereignty. This chapter reminds readers of the significance of acknowledging God's authority in their lives and the importance of humility. As we continue to explore the life of Daniel and his interactions with Nebuchadnezzar, we will see how faithfulness and humility can lead to profound transformations and the acknowledgement of God's greatness. Chapter 5. The Writing on the Wall. Chapter 5 of the book of Daniel recounts a dramatic event during the reign of King Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's successor. This chapter illustrates themes of pride, judgment, and the sovereignty of God, culminating in a powerful lesson about the consequences of ignoring divine authority. The Feast of King Belshazzar. The chapter opens with King Belshazzar hosting a grand feast for 1,000 of his nobles, celebrating in excess while drinking wine from the sacred goblets taken from the temple in Jerusalem. Daniel 5 verses 1 to 2. During the feast, Belshazzar commanded that the golden and silver vessels, which had been taken from the temple, be brought in so that he and his guests could drink from them. As they drank, they praised the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. completely disregarding the God of Israel. Daniel 5 verses 3 to 4. This act of sacrilege demonstrated a blatant disrespect for God and a profound arrogance. The mysterious writing. Suddenly, fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. The king watched in terror as the hand wrote a message, but he was unable to understand its meaning. Daniel 5 verses 5 to 6. His face grew pale, and he was filled with fear, leading him to call for the wise men of Babylon to interpret the writing. Despite their efforts, none of the wise men could decipher the message, which only increased Belshazzar's anxiety. Daniel 5 verses 7 to 9. In desperation, the king promised great rewards to anyone who could interpret the writing, including purple robes, gold chains, and the third highest position in the kingdom. The queen's reminder. Amidst the chaos, the queen, likely the queen mother, entered the banquet hall and reminded Belshazzar of Daniel, who had previously interpreted dreams and solved mysteries for Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel 5 verses 10 to 12. She urged him to summon Daniel, believing that he could provide the interpretation needed. Daniel's arrival. When Daniel was brought before the king, Belshazzar expressed his fear and offered him the promised rewards for interpreting the writing. Daniel, however, initially declined the rewards, stating that he would interpret the writing for the king without accepting gifts. Daniel 5 verses 13 to 17. A reminder of Nebuchadnezzar's fall. Before interpreting the writing, Daniel recounted the story of Nebuchadnezzar, reminding Belshazzar of his predecessor's pride and eventual downfall due to his failure to acknowledge God's sovereignty. Daniel 5 verses 18 to 21. He emphasized that Belshazzar had followed in Nebuchadnezzar's footsteps, showing arrogance and failing to honor the God who held his life and breath in his hands. The interpretation of the writing. Daniel then turned to the mysterious writing on the wall, which read, Mean, Tekel, Parsin. He explained the meaning of each word. Mean, God has numbered the days of Belshazzar's reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, Belshazzar has been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Perez, his kingdom will be divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Daniel 5 verses 25 to 28. The fall of Belshazzar. After delivering the interpretation, Daniel concluded by declaring that the kingdom would be taken from Belshazzar that very night. Despite the dire message, Belshazzar honored Daniel, clothing him in purple robes and placing a gold chain around his neck, appointing him to the third highest position in the kingdom. Daniel 5 verse 29. That very night, the prophecy came to pass. Belshazzar was killed, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom. Daniel 5 verses 30 to 31. Conclusion of the chapter. Chapter 5 serves as a stark warning about the dangers of pride and the consequences of failing to honor God. Belshazzar's disregard for God, exemplified by his sacrilegious feast, led to his swift and devastating judgment. This chapter emphasizes the importance of humility and the recognition of God's sovereignty over all nations and rulers. As we continue to explore the life of Daniel, we will see how his unwavering faith and ability to interpret God's messages not only impacted the kingdoms of his time, but also serve as timeless lessons for all believers. Chapter 6. Daniel in the Lion's Den. Chapter 6 of the book of Daniel narrates one of the most famous stories in the Bible, Daniel's miraculous deliverance from the lion's den. This chapter highlights themes of faithfulness, integrity, and the sovereignty of God, showcasing Daniel's unwavering commitment to his beliefs even in the face of grave danger. Darius becomes king. The chapter begins with Darius the Mede taking over the kingdom after the fall of Belshazzar. Daniel 6 verse 1. Darius decided to appoint 120 satraps, governors, to rule throughout the kingdom, and over them, he placed 3 administrators, one of whom was Daniel. Daniel distinguished himself among the administrators due to his exceptional qualities, prompting Darius to consider setting him over the entire realm. Daniel 6 verses 2 to 3. Jealousy among the officials. The other administrators and satraps became envious of Daniel's favor with the king. They sought to find grounds for charges against him, but could not find any corruption or negligence in his conduct. Daniel 6 verse 4. Recognizing that they could not discredit Daniel's character, they devised a plan to exploit his devotion to God. The decree against prayer. The officials approached King Darius and convinced him to issue a decree that for 30 days, Anyone who prayed to any god or human being except to the king would be thrown into the lion's den. Daniel 6 verses 5 to 7. Darius, perhaps flattered by the attention and unaware of their ulterior motives, signed the decree, making it irrevocable according to the laws of the Medes and Persians. Daniel 6 verse 8. Daniel's faithfulness. Despite the decree, Daniel continued to pray to his God 3 times a day, giving thanks as he had always done. Daniel 6 verse 10. His commitment to God remained steadfast, demonstrating his priority of faith over fear. The officials, knowing Daniel's routine, quickly reported his actions to the king. Daniel is arrested. When Darius learned that Daniel had defied the decree, he was greatly distressed and sought to save him, realizing that he had been manipulated by the other officials. Daniel 6 verses 11 to 14. However, the law could not be changed, and the king reluctantly ordered Daniel to be thrown into the lion's den. Daniel 6 verses 15 to 16. Before being thrown into the den, Darius expressed hope that Daniel's God would rescue him. Daniel 6 verse 16. The lion's den. A stone was placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and the rings of his nobles, ensuring that no one could rescue Daniel. Daniel 6 verse 17. Afterward, Darius returned to his palace and spent the night fasting, refusing to entertain any diversions. Daniel 6 verse 18. God's deliverance. At dawn, the king hurried to the lion's den and called out to Daniel, hoping for a miracle. To his astonishment, Daniel replied, stating that God had sent his angel to shut the mouths of the lions, and he was unharmed because he had been found innocent in God's sight. Daniel 6 verses 19 to 22. In Daniel 6 verse 22, NIV, Daniel proclaimed, "My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king's reaction. Overjoyed by Daniel's survival, Darius ordered him to be lifted out of the den, and no wound was found on him. Daniel 6 verse 23. The king then commanded that those who had falsely accused Daniel be thrown into the lion's den, along with their families, where they were immediately killed by the lions. Daniel 6 verse 24. Darius's decree. After these events, King Darius wrote to all peoples and nations, proclaiming the greatness of Daniel's God. He acknowledged God's eternal kingdom and his ability to rescue and save. Daniel 6 verses 25 to 27. In Daniel 6 verses 26 to 27, NIV, Darius declared, "I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." Conclusion of the chapter. Chapter 6 of Daniel highlights Daniel's unwavering faith in God, even when faced with imminent danger. His integrity and commitment to his beliefs ultimately led to a miraculous deliverance that not only preserved his life, but also served as a powerful testimony to the sovereignty of God. This chapter teaches valuable lessons about the importance of standing firm in faith, the power of prayer, and the impact of one individual's faithfulness on an entire kingdom. As we continue to explore the life of Daniel, we will witness how his dedication to God influenced those around him and shaped the course of history. Chapter 7. Daniel's Vision of the Four Beasts. Chapter 7 of the book of Daniel marks a significant shift in the narrative, transitioning from historical accounts to prophetic visions. In this chapter, Daniel receives a vivid and symbolic vision that reveals God's sovereignty over the kingdoms of the earth. This chapter introduces themes of eschatology, divine judgment, and the ultimate triumph of God's kingdom. Daniel's dream. The chapter begins with Daniel having a dream during the first year of King Belshazzar's reign. In his dream, he saw four great beasts coming up from the sea, each different from the others. Daniel 7 verses 1 to 3. This imagery of beasts emerging from the chaotic waters symbolizes the tumultuous nature of earthly kingdoms and their opposition to God. The four beasts. The first beast. The first beast was like a lion with eagle's wings. As Daniel watched, its wings were plucked, and it was lifted from the ground, made to stand like a human, and given a human mind. Daniel 7 verse 4. This beast often represents Babylon and its king, Nebuchadnezzar. The second beast. The second beast resembled a bear, raised up on one side with 3 ribs in its mouth. It was commanded to arise and devour much flesh, Daniel 7 verse 5. This beast is frequently interpreted as representing the Medo-Persian Empire. The third beast. The third beast looked like a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. It was given dominion, Daniel 7 verse 6. This beast is commonly associated with the Greek Empire, particularly under Alexander the Great, who swiftly conquered much of the known world. The fourth beast. The fourth beast was terrifying, powerful, and had iron teeth. It devoured and crushed everything in its path and was different from all the beasts before it. This beast had 10 horns, Daniel 7 verse 7. The identity of this beast is often linked to the Roman Empire or a future kingdom characterized by great power and oppression. The little horn. As Daniel observed the fourth beast, he noticed that among the 10 horns, a little horn emerged, uprooting 3 of the other horns. This little horn had eyes like a man and a mouth that spoke arrogantly, Daniel 7 verse 8. This figure is often interpreted as a representation of a future oppressive ruler, sometimes referred to as the Antichrist. The judgment scene. Daniel then saw a vision of thrones being set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and his hair like pure wool. The throne was fiery flames, and wheels were burning fire, Daniel 7 verse 9. This scene depicts God's authority and holiness. A river of fire flowed from before him, and countless thousands attended him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened, Daniel 7 verse 10. This imagery emphasizes God's role as the ultimate judge of all nations and leaders. The judgment of the beasts. As Daniel continued to watch, the fourth beast was slain, and its body destroyed, thrown into the blazing fire, Daniel 7 verse 11. The other beasts had their dominion taken away, but they were allowed to live for a time, Daniel 7 verse 12. This indicates that while earthly kingdoms may rise and fall, God's judgment will ultimately prevail. The coming of the Son of Man. Daniel then saw one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him, Daniel 7 verses 13 to 14. This figure is often interpreted as a prophetic reference to Jesus Christ, who is referred to as the Son of Man in the New Testament. The interpretation of the dream. Following the vision, Daniel was troubled and sought understanding. He approached one of the bystanders who explained the meaning of the vision, Daniel 7 verses 15 to 16. The interpretation revealed that the 4 beasts represented 4 kingdoms that would arise on the earth. However, the saints of the Most High would receive the kingdom and possess it forever, Daniel 7 verses 17 to 18. The revelation of the fourth beast. The interpretation of the fourth beast and the little horn was provided in more detail. The fourth beast represented a fourth kingdom that would be different from all the others, and the little horn would speak against the Most High, oppress the saints, and attempt to change the set times and laws, Daniel 7 verses 19 to 25. However, it was prophesied that the situation would not last forever. The court would sit in judgment, and the dominion of the little horn would be taken away and destroyed, Daniel 7 verses 26 to 27. Conclusion of the chapter. The chapter concludes with Daniel acknowledging the seriousness of the vision and expressing his thoughts, Daniel 7 verse 28. The vision of the 4 beasts and the subsequent judgment underscores God's sovereignty over human history and his ultimate plan for redemption and justice. Chapter 7 of Daniel is a powerful reminder of the transient nature of earthly kingdoms and the eternal nature of God's kingdom. It encourages believers to remain faithful in the face of adversity, knowing that God will ultimately prevail and establish his reign. As we continue to explore the book of Daniel, we will see how these prophetic visions shape our understanding of God's divine plan throughout history. Chapter 8. Daniel's vision of the ram and the goat. Chapter 8 of the book of Daniel presents another significant vision, this time focusing on the future conflicts between the Medo-Persian and Greek empires. This chapter further explores themes of prophecy, divine revelation, and the sovereignty of God over the affairs of nations. Daniel's vision. The chapter opens with Daniel having a vision during the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign. In this vision, He finds himself in the citadel of Susa, which is located in the province of Elam, by the Ulai Canal, Daniel 8 verses 1-2. Daniel describes the vision he experienced, which involves two notable animals, a ram and a goat. The ram and the goat. The ram. Daniel sees a ram with two horns, standing by the canal. The horns are long, with one being higher than the other. The ram charges westward, northward, and southward, defeating all the animals it encounters, Daniel 8 verses 3-4. The ram symbolizes the Medo-Persian Empire, which was dominant at the time. The goat. In contrast, a goat appears from the west, moving swiftly across the ground without touching the ground. The goat has a prominent horn between its eyes, representing a singular power, Daniel 8 verse 5. This goat symbolizes the Greek Empire, particularly Alexander the Great, who conquered the known world rapidly. The conquest of the goat. As Daniel observes the goat, it attacks the ram with great fury, shattering its two horns and trampling it down. The goat becomes very powerful, but once it reaches its peak, the large horn is broken, and in its place, four notable horns emerge toward the four winds of heaven, Daniel 8 verses 6-8. This reflects the division of Alexander's empire after his death into four separate kingdoms ruled by his generals. The little horn. From one of the four horns, a little horn emerges, which grows in power and extends to the south, east, and toward the beautiful land, Daniel 8 verse 9. The little horn symbolizes a future king who will arise and oppose the people of God, leading to significant persecution. The little horn becomes increasingly arrogant, opposing the host of heaven, throwing some of the starry host down to the ground and trampling them, Daniel 8 verse 10. It also challenges the daily sacrifice and alters the sanctuary, which signifies an attack on the worship practices of the Jewish people, Daniel 8 verses 11-12. The vision of the evening and morning. While Daniel is trying to understand the vision, he hears a conversation between two heavenly beings discussing the duration of the vision, concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression that causes desolation. They mention that it will last for 2,300 evenings and mornings, after which the sanctuary will be restored, Daniel 8 verses 13-14. This period is often interpreted as a reference to the time until the rededication of the temple after the Maccabean revolt. The interpretation of the vision. As Daniel is troubled by the vision, he sees a figure in the vision who is identified as Gabriel, the angelic messenger. Gabriel is instructed to explain the vision to Daniel, Daniel 8 verses 15-16. Gabriel informs Daniel that the two-horned ram represents the kings of Media and Persia, while the goat symbolizes the king of Greece. The large horn is the first king, and the four horns that arise after it represent four kingdoms that will emerge from his nation but will not have the same power, Daniel 8 verses 20-22. The little horn explained. Gabriel further reveals that the little horn represents a king who will arise in the latter time of the kingdom, and he will be fierce and skilled in intrigue, Daniel 8 verse 23. This king will cause destruction, oppose the holy people, and will be successful until the time of judgment is fulfilled, as the vision is about the appointed time of the end, Daniel 8 verses 24-25. Daniel's reaction. After receiving the interpretation, Daniel is overwhelmed by the vision and its implications. He is sick for several days and ultimately gets up to carry out his duties, though he is troubled by the vision, Daniel 8 verses 26-27. Conclusion of the chapter. Chapter 8 of Daniel emphasizes God's sovereignty over historical events and the rise and fall of empires. The vision of the ram and the goat, along with the interpretation provided by Gabriel, serves as a prophetic revelation of the struggles that the Jewish people would face in the coming years, particularly during the Hellenistic period and the rise of oppressive rulers. This chapter reminds readers of the importance of faithfulness to God amidst trials and tribulations. It highlights God's control over history and his ultimate plan for the restoration of his people. As we continue to explore the book of Daniel, we will see how these prophetic messages continue to resonate with themes of hope, perseverance, and divine deliverance. Chapter 9. Daniel's Prayer in the 70 Weeks. Chapter 9 of the book of Daniel is a poignant chapter that combines deep personal prayer with significant prophetic revelations. This chapter emphasizes themes of repentance, God's faithfulness, and the future restoration of Israel. Daniel's Prayer of Confession. The chapter begins in the first year of Darius son of Xerxes, during the reign of the Medes, Daniel 9 verse 1. Daniel, having understood from the scriptures that the desolation of Jerusalem would last for 70 years, as prophesied by Jeremiah, turns to God in fervent prayer, Daniel 9 verse 2. In his prayer, Daniel acknowledges the greatness of God and his covenant with the people of Israel. He confesses the sins of the people, recognizing their unfaithfulness and rebellion against God, Daniel 9 verses 3 to 5. He implores God for mercy and forgiveness, not based on the righteousness of the people, but on God's great compassion, Daniel 9 verses 18 to 19. Key components of Daniel's prayer. Confession of sin. Daniel confesses that both he and his people have sinned against God, Daniel 9 verse 5. Appeal for mercy. He appeals to God's mercy, acknowledging that they deserve the consequences of their actions, Daniel 9 verses 7 to 9. Recognition of God's faithfulness. Daniel reminds God of his promises and faithfulness, Daniel 9 verses 10 to 15. God's response through Gabriel. While Daniel was still praying, Gabriel, the angel, came to him in swift flight and provided understanding, Daniel 9 verses 20 to 21. Gabriel reveals that Daniel is highly esteemed by God, indicating that his prayers have been heard. Gabriel then delivers a prophetic message concerning the future of the Jewish people and Jerusalem, Daniel 9 verses 22 to 23. The prophecy of the 70 weeks. Gabriel outlines the timing of significant events in the future concerning the Jewish people and Jerusalem. He introduces the concept of 70 weeks or 77s, which is often interpreted as 490 years, Daniel 9 verse 24. This period is divided into 3 distinct segments. 7 weeks, 49 years. This period is associated with the rebuilding of Jerusalem after the Babylonian captivity. It includes the restoration of the city and its walls. 62 weeks, 434 years following the 7 weeks. There will be 62 weeks before an anointed one is cut off. This is often interpreted as a reference to the coming of the Messiah, who will be rejected. 1 week, 7 years. This final week is crucial, as it introduces the concept of a covenant established with many. In the middle of this week, sacrifices and offerings will cease, indicating a time of great tribulation and the emergence of a desolator, Daniel 9 verses 26 to 27. The Anointed One and the Desolator. Gabriel explains that after the 62 weeks, an anointed one will be cut off, and the people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, Daniel 9 verse 26. This verse is commonly understood as a prophecy concerning the death of Jesus Christ and the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. The chapter concludes with a reference to the covenant made by the desolator, who will bring destruction until the end is decreed, Daniel 9 verse 27. This section of the prophecy has been interpreted by many scholars as pointing to the Antichrist and the events of the end times. Conclusion of the chapter. Chapter 9 of Daniel serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of repentance, the sovereignty of God over history, and the hope for restoration. Daniel's heartfelt prayer reflects the state of the Jewish people in exile and their longing for forgiveness and restoration to their homeland. The prophecy of the 70 weeks provides a timeline for significant events in Israel's history and the coming of the Messiah. This chapter emphasizes God's faithfulness to his promises and the ultimate hope of redemption for his people. As we continue to explore the book of Daniel, we will see how these prophetic revelations shape our understanding of God's plan for humanity and the fulfillment of his promises. Chapter 10. Daniel's Vision of a Glorious Being. Chapter 10 of the book of Daniel serves as an introduction to the final visions recorded in the book. This chapter highlights themes of spiritual warfare, divine revelation, and the importance of prayer. It provides insight into the challenges faced by Daniel and the spiritual realm that influences earthly events. Daniel's mourning and prayer. The chapter begins in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia. Daniel receives a revelation about a great conflict and is deeply troubled by the vision. Daniel 10 verse 1. He enters a period of mourning and fasting for 3 weeks, abstaining from pleasant food, meat, and wine. Daniel 10 verses 2 to 3. Daniel's mourning reflects his deep concern for the people of Israel and the state of Jerusalem. The vision of the glorious being. On the 24th day of the month, Daniel has a remarkable vision by the bank of the Tigris River. He sees a man clothed in linen, with a belt of fine gold, a face like lightning, eyes like flaming torches, arms and legs like polished bronze, and a voice like the sound of a multitude. Daniel 10 verses 4 to 6. This striking figure is often interpreted as an angelic being, possibly a manifestation of Christ or Gabriel. The reaction of Daniel. When Daniel sees this glorious being, he is overwhelmed. His companions do not see the vision but are filled with fear and flee, leaving Daniel alone. Daniel 10 verse 7. Daniel, upon seeing the vision, falls into a deep sleep with his face to the ground, overwhelmed by the power and glory of the being before him. Daniel 10 verses 8 to 9. The touch and strengthening. The glorious being touches Daniel and tells him not to be afraid. He reassures Daniel that he is highly esteemed and encourages him to listen to his words. Daniel 10 verses 10 to 12. The being explains that his arrival was delayed because of spiritual opposition, specifically the prince of the Persian kingdom, who resisted him for 21 days. Daniel 10 verse 13. This reference indicates a spiritual battle occurring in the heavenly realms, affecting events on earth. Insight into spiritual warfare. The being reveals that Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help him in this spiritual conflict. Daniel 10 verse 13. This highlights the reality of spiritual warfare and the involvement of angelic beings in the affairs of nations. The glorious being indicates that he has come to explain what will happen to Daniel's people in the latter days. Daniel 10 verse 14. The vision and its meaning. As the being speaks, Daniel is again overwhelmed and unable to speak due to fear and exhaustion. The being again touches Daniel, strengthening him and providing him with the ability to stand. Daniel 10 verses 15 to 19. The being reassures Daniel, stating that he is not alone in his struggles and that his prayers have been heard. Conclusion of the chapter. The chapter closes with the glorious being preparing to reveal the future events concerning Israel. He indicates that he will tell Daniel what is written in the Book of Truth. Daniel 10 verses 20 to 21. This sets the stage for the following chapters, where Daniel will receive more detailed revelations about the future of his people. Chapter 10 emphasizes the importance of prayer and the reality of spiritual battles that influence the course of history. Daniel's commitment to fasting and seeking God reflects the seriousness of his concern for his people and their future. The vision reveals both the glory of God and the challenges faced in the spiritual realm, reminding believers of the unseen forces at work in the world. As we proceed to the following chapters in the book of Daniel, we will explore the profound revelations and prophecies that further illuminate God's plan for Israel and the nations. Chapter 11. The Kings of the South and the North. Chapter 11 of the book of Daniel provides one of the most detailed prophetic visions in the Bible, focusing on the historical conflicts between various kingdoms, particularly the kings of the North and the South. This chapter emphasizes God's sovereignty over history and the unfolding of his divine plan. The vision of future conflicts. The chapter opens with a reference to the previous revelations given to Daniel. The angelic being continues to explain the future events that will impact the Jewish people. Daniel 11 verse 1. The vision outlines a series of kings and conflicts that will shape the geopolitical landscape of the ancient Near East. The rise of the Persian Empire. The chapter begins with a brief mention of the Persian Empire, stating that 3 more kings will arise in Persia, followed by a 4th who will be far richer than the others. This 4th king will stir up everyone against the kingdom of Greece. Daniel 11 verse 2. This king is commonly identified as Xerxes I, known for his wealth and for launching a massive invasion of Greece. The rise of the Greek Empire. Following the Persian kings, a mighty king will arise in Greece. Daniel 11 verse 3. Often interpreted as Alexander the Great. He will have great dominion and will do as he pleases. However, after his rule, his kingdom will be divided into 4 parts, as previously prophesied in Daniel 8, Daniel 11 verse 4. This division reflects the historical reality of Alexander's empire being split among his generals after his death. The kings of the South and the North. The narrative then shifts to the conflicts between the kings of the South, Egypt, and the kings of the North, Syria. The king of the South will wage war against the king of the North, and there will be a series of battles and alliances. Daniel 11 verses 5 to 6. King of the South, often identified with the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt. King of the North, associated with the Seleucid dynasty in Syria. These two kingdoms engage in a complex interplay of power, marriage alliances, and conflicts, with notable figures such as Antiochus III, the Great, playing significant roles, Daniel 11 verses 7 to 10. The rise of Antiochus IV. The chapter continues to describe the rise of a particularly cruel ruler, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who comes to power after a period of conflict and intrigue, Daniel 11 verse 21. He is characterized by his arrogance and blasphemy against God. His actions include persecution of the Jewish people. Antiochus IV is known for his severe persecution of the Jews and his attempts to Hellenize the Jewish population. Desolation of the temple. He sets up an abomination in the temple, leading to the desecration of the holy place, Daniel 11 verse 31. This period of persecution is a significant focus of the chapter, illustrating the trials faced by the Jewish people during this time. The end times and final conflict. As the chapter progresses, it shifts toward a more eschatological theme, describing a time of great distress and conflict that will culminate in the final confrontation between the forces of evil and God's people, Daniel 11 verses 32 to 35. The faithful will endure persecution, but those who are wise will understand and remain steadfast in their faith. The chapter concludes with a depiction of the ultimate conflict and the eventual triumph of God's kingdom. The description of the final king is often interpreted as a reference to an end-times figure who will oppose God and his people, Daniel 11 verses 36 to 45. Conclusion of the chapter. Chapter 11 of Daniel serves as a historical overview of the conflicts that impacted Israel and a prophetic revelation of the trials and tribulations that would come in the future. It emphasizes God's sovereignty over earthly powers and the assurance that, despite suffering and opposition, He will ultimately prevail. This chapter encourages readers to remain faithful amid challenges, trusting in God's promises and the eventual restoration of His people. As we move into the final chapter of the book of Daniel, we will see how these themes of hope and divine intervention culminate in God's ultimate plan for humanity. Chapter 12. The Final Revelation in the End Times. Chapter 12 of the book of Daniel serves as the conclusion of the book and encapsulates the prophetic visions and themes presented throughout. This chapter focuses on the end times, the resurrection of the dead, and the ultimate hope for God's people. It highlights the certainty of God's plans and the assurance of resurrection and eternal life. The time of trouble. The chapter opens with a description of a time of unprecedented trouble for the people of Israel, often interpreted as the Great Tribulation. Daniel 12 verse 1. Michael, the archangel, is mentioned as the protector of the people, standing up during this difficult time. This verse emphasizes the spiritual warfare and divine protection that will be present during these tumultuous times. Deliverance and resurrection. During this time of distress, those whose names are found written in the book will be delivered. Daniel 12 verse 1. This reference to the book is often associated with the book of life, indicating that those who are faithful to God will be saved. Following this promise of deliverance, the chapter speaks of a resurrection of the dead. It states that many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life and others to shame and everlasting contempt. Daniel 12 verse 2. This verse is significant as it highlights the concept of resurrection, a key belief in both Judaism and Christianity. The wise will shine. The chapter continues by stating that those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness will be like the stars forever and ever. Daniel 12 verse 3. This serves as an encouragement to remain faithful and to strive for righteousness, promising eternal reward for those who guide others in the truth. The sealed vision. Daniel is then instructed to seal up the vision and the words of the book until the time of the end. Daniel 12 verse 4. This sealing indicates that the full understanding of the prophecies contained in the book would not be fully revealed until the appointed time. The mention of knowledge increasing reflects the idea that as time progresses, there will be greater understanding of God's plans. Questions about the end times. As the vision continues, two other figures appear, and Daniel hears one of them ask how long it will be until the end of these wonders. Daniel 12 verses 5 to 6. The response is given as a time, times, and half a time, which is often interpreted as 3.5 years. Daniel 12 verse 7. This period is commonly associated with the time of tribulation and suffering for God's people. Daniel then asks about the outcome of these events. and he is told that the words are closed and sealed until the time of the end, Daniel 12 verses 8 to 9. The emphasis is placed on the fact that many will be purified, made white, and refined, but the wicked will continue in their wickedness, Daniel 12 verse 10. The number of days. The chapter concludes with specific time frames. Daniel is told that from the time the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days, Daniel 12 verse 11. Additionally, a blessing is pronounced on those who wait and reach the end of the 1,335 days, Daniel 12 verse 12. These time frames are often debated among scholars and interpreted in various ways concerning the end times. Daniel's destiny. Finally, the chapter ends with a personal message to Daniel. He is encouraged to go his way until the end, assuring him that he will rest and later rise to receive his allotted inheritance at the end of the days, Daniel 12 verse 13. This promise of reward serves as a hopeful conclusion, affirming Daniel's faithfulness and the ultimate resurrection for all who believe. Conclusion of the chapter. Chapter 12 of Daniel encapsulates the themes of the entire book, focusing on God's sovereignty, the promise of resurrection, and the hope of eternal life for his people. It emphasizes the reality of spiritual warfare, the assurance of divine protection, and the ultimate triumph of God's kingdom. This chapter encourages believers to remain steadfast in their faith and to share the truth with others as they await the fulfillment of God's promises. As we conclude our exploration of the book of Daniel, we are reminded of the significance of these prophetic revelations and their relevance to our understanding of God's plan for humanity and the world. Chapter 13. The Story of Susanna. Chapter 13 of the book of Daniel is not included in the Hebrew Bible, but is found in the Greek version known as the Septuagint and in the additions to Daniel. This chapter tells the story of Susanna, a faithful and virtuous woman who faces a grave injustice but ultimately finds vindication through God's intervention. The setting. The story begins in Babylon, where a wealthy and respected man named Joachim lived. Joachim had a beautiful wife named Susanna, who was known for her piety and virtue, Daniel 13 verses 1 to 2. The narrative highlights Susanna's character, emphasizing her faithfulness and dedication to God. The attempted seduction. While Susanna was taking a bath in her husband's garden, two elderly judges who were appointed to govern the people spied on her. These judges were corrupt and had lustful intentions, Daniel 13 verses 4 to 8. They attempted to seduce her, threatening to accuse her of adultery if she refused their advances. They claimed that they would testify against her, asserting she had been with a young man, Daniel 13 verses 9 to 11. Susanna, however, remained steadfast in her faith and integrity. She resisted their advances, stating that she could not commit such a sin against God, Daniel 13 verse 22. The judges, enraged by her refusal, falsely accused her of wrongdoing, leading to her arrest, Daniel 13 verses 12 to 15. The trial of Susanna. Susanna was brought before the people for judgment. The corrupt judges testified against her, claiming they had seen her with a young man, Daniel 13 verses 19 to 22. Despite her protests of innocence and her cries for justice, the assembly believed the judges and condemned her to death, Daniel 13 verses 23 to 24. Daniel's intervention. As Susanna was being led to her execution, the young prophet Daniel arrived on the scene. He was filled with the Spirit of God and recognized the injustice being done, Daniel 13 verse 45. Daniel called out to the people, demanding to know why they were condemning Susanna based on the testimony of the two judges without proper investigation, Daniel 13 verse 46. He insisted that they separate the judges and question them individually about the details of their accusations, Daniel 13 verse 48. The assembly complied, and Daniel confronted each judge, asking them about the details of the alleged crime. The judge's false testimony. When questioned, the first judge claimed to have seen Susanna with a young man under a type of tree, Daniel 13 verse 51. However, when Daniel asked which tree it was, the judge described a type of tree that was not consistent with the other judge's account. The inconsistencies in their testimonies revealed their deceit, Daniel 13 verses 52 to 54. As a result, Daniel declared that the judges were guilty of perjury and had falsely accused an innocent woman. The crowd was astonished by Daniel's wisdom and recognized the truth of Susanna's innocence. Daniel 13 verses 55 to 58. The judges were subsequently punished according to the law they had sought to exploit. Susanna's vindication. With her innocence proven, Susanna was released, and the people praised God for his justice and for sending Daniel to expose the wickedness of the judges. Daniel 13 verses 59 to 60. Susanna's faithfulness and integrity were rewarded, demonstrating that God protects the righteous. Conclusion of the chapter. Chapter 13 of Daniel illustrates themes of justice, faithfulness, and divine intervention. It highlights the importance of integrity and the power of God to vindicate those who trust in him. Susanna's story serves as a reminder that even in the face of false accusations and injustice, God is present and will ultimately bring truth to light. This chapter also emphasizes the role of the faithful in standing up against corruption and evil, showcasing Daniel as a figure of wisdom and righteousness. The story of Susanna encourages readers to maintain their faith and integrity, trusting that God sees all and will act on behalf of the innocent. As we reflect on this narrative, we are reminded of the importance of justice and the assurance that God is our defender. Chapter 14. The story of Bel and the dragon. Chapter 14 of the book of Daniel, like chapter 13, is part of the editions found in the Greek Septuagint and is not included in the Hebrew Bible. This chapter presents a narrative that emphasizes the futility of idol worship and the power of the true God. It tells the story of a confrontation between the prophet Daniel and the pagan practices surrounding the worship of the Babylonian god Bel and the dragon. The worship of Bel. The chapter begins by describing how the Babylonian king, along with the people, worshipped the god Bel, who was believed to consume large quantities of offerings. Daniel 14 verses 1 to 2. The king was impressed with the idol and provided it with daily offerings of food and drink, believing it to be a living god. Daniel, however, pointed out that the idol was merely a statue and could not consume the offerings as the king believed. Daniel 14 verse 3. He highlighted the absurdity of worshiping something that required human sustenance. The challenge to Bel. To demonstrate the futility of idol worship, Daniel devised a plan. He suggested that the king put Bel to the test. If Bel was truly a god, he should consume the offerings on his own. Daniel 14 verse 4. The king agreed to this challenge and set up the offerings for Bel, expecting to see them consumed by the idol. However, Daniel had secretly arranged for the priests of Bel to enter the temple at night and consume the offerings themselves, ensuring that the idol would appear to be consuming the food. Daniel 14 verses 5 to 6. The priests brought their families into the temple, and under the cover of darkness, they ate the offerings, making it seem as though Bel was consuming them. The discovery of the deception. When the king saw that the offerings were gone the next day, he was pleased and believed that Bel had consumed them. Daniel 14 verse 7. However, Daniel soon revealed the truth. He exposed the priest's deception and pointed out that they had been eating the offerings instead of Bel. Daniel 14 verses 8 to 10. In response, the king was furious and ordered the execution of the priests of Bel and their families. Daniel 14 verse 11. This act demonstrates the consequences of false worship and the importance of truth. The dragon. In addition to the story of Bel, the chapter introduces another element, a dragon that the Babylonians worshipped. Daniel 14 verse 13. The king asked Daniel if he would worship the dragon, and Daniel refused, stating that he only worshipped the living God. To further confront the worship of the dragon, Daniel devised another challenge. He proposed that the king provide him with food and drink for the dragon, which he would then feed to the dragon. Daniel 14 verse 15. Daniel took the dragon's food and instead threw it to the dogs, who quickly devoured it. Daniel 14 verse 16. When the king saw this, he was astonished and realized that the dragon was not a god, as it could not defend itself or consume food. Daniel 14 verses 17 to 19. The king's recognition of the true God. By exposing the futility of both Bel and the dragon, Daniel demonstrated the power of the true God. The king was deeply impressed by Daniel's wisdom and the truth of his words. He recognized that the idols were nothing compared to the living God. Daniel 14 verse 20. As a result, the king ordered that Daniel be honored and that the worship of the true God be promoted in Babylon. Daniel 14 verses 21 to 23. This chapter concludes with a powerful assertion of God's sovereignty over all false gods. Conclusion of the chapter. Chapter 14 of Daniel underscores the themes of idolatry, truth, and God's sovereignty. It serves as a reminder of the futility of worshiping false gods and the importance of recognizing and honoring the one true God. Daniel's boldness in confronting the idolatry of his time exemplifies the call for believers to stand firm in their faith and to bear witness to God's truth. This chapter also highlights the ultimate triumph of God over the idols of the world, demonstrating that no matter how powerful or revered an idol may seem, it cannot compare to the greatness of the Creator. The narrative encourages readers to remain steadfast in their faith and to trust in the power of God to reveal truth and dispel falsehood. As we reflect on this story, we are reminded of the importance of worshiping the living God and the futility of placing our faith in anything else. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the life of Daniel. I hope you found inspiration and insight in these stories. May you carry the lessons learned into your own life. God bless you. In our journey through life, we often seek guidance and wisdom beyond our own understanding. St. Michael's prayer is a beautiful expression of this desire, a heartfelt plea for divine intervention and alignment with Jehovah's will. It serves as a reminder of the profound connection we can cultivate with the divine, allowing us to become vessels of his wisdom and love. St. Michael's prayer: I pray for Jehovah to speak through me all the time, and I pray for Jehovah to remove all my thoughts and implant his thoughts all the time, as I do not even want my thoughts. Join us at jehovahsaint.com for free online Bibles, audio Bibles, and prayer requests. Explore and connect with faith in our welcoming community.